Hello and welcome to Asking Canadians' continuing series of Delve In with Asking Canadians. I'm Pat Prunskus. Joining me today is Sabrina Clarke Duffy, originally from Sheffield, England. Sabrina brings 20 years of leadership experience from global network companies in the UK, US, and Canada, having helped Fortune 500 brands develop their communication strategies, innovation pipelines, and achieve strong, sustainable growth. And Sabrina, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Pat.
We recently ran some questions across the Asking Canadians panel. Those questions focused on home renovations in the year ahead, specifically which areas people are looking to do residential home improvement in 2021 and the estimated spend on those renovations. First off, why those questions?
So the home improvement industry it's been very engaging and very interesting in 2020. If we think about the current state of play, most of us are working from home, as you can see. I'm working from home, you're working from home today. So the trend really has been, you look around your room and you think, what is it that I would like to do differently? What is it that I would like to change? And so whilst people in the past have always engaged in small repair or home maintenance, I just think that appetite has really, really increased. And people are wanting to really instill their style, their personal taste, wanting to really bring to life that sense of pride that they take in their home. And home improvement is one of those industries that's really benefited, albeit from the pandemic situation that exists. So the reason for those questions were really to get a gauge on, we know where we are today during the current pandemic. We really wanted to explore and understand how that potentially would evolve, would change, would be different in 2020 as we potentially embark in a recession. Do people have an appetite to spend, and what areas specifically will they be spending on?
I know I'm planning on doing the floor in this very room in the weeks and months ahead. What did you learn from the findings, and what were some of the key takeaways?
So the first thing that stood out to me was this idea of wanting two consumers saying they're going to do absolutely nothing as they think about 2021. And I think that's the reality of the climate that we're in right now, where some people will be embarking on changes and others potentially don't believe they'll have the means to do so. Maybe they've done enough in 2020 to keep them comfortable with where they are. Or maybe they just don't foresee that long ahead, given the current climate. Those that did say they would engage were likely to conduct bathroom and kitchen renovations. I think areas that we can all agree are ones that are top of the list. Also ones that are big ticket items. So to renovate one's bathroom or one kitchen is quite pricey. Appliances, tiles, etc. That really does bring up the price of the renovation, and we saw that too. So people saying that they would do renovations in these key areas, along with landscaping. So landscaping being that extension of our home in the summer months and the spring months. So those really are the hotspot areas and where consumers perceive they will make changes in 2021.
I can definitely see in a pandemic life trying to build an oasis in your own backyard. Quite often on the Asking Canadians and the data collection side of things, we don't get to see how the data is implemented for your client. What does OnPoint Insights do next?
So when people ask me what we do, particularly when it comes to quantitative information, I like to say that we advocate the voice of the consumer. So what does that mean? It means that if you're having a conversation as we are now, I would say it's quite easy to understand what I'm saying. It's easy to understand the sequential flow of what I'm saying, my beliefs, my intents, my expressions. It's a little easier to really hone in on the content. When you're thinking about quantitative data, you've got lots of information pieces. We send you surveys that you put into field, and then we get all of that numerical value back. And so what my role is finding patterns within those different quantitative data points and making that sequential conversation. So when I speak to my clients about their marketing strategies or speak to my clients about what they're trying to understand, I'm bringing that holistic voice back to them, as opposed to just number and just information points. So it really is finding paths that help the client understand and my partners understand if what they're doing is going to pay dividends. I would say that's become particularly interesting during current times, because whilst we're evaluating quantitative information, there's definitely implicit expressions at play. And some things, whilst might be implied, other things might be overstated. So it's made my role a lot more challenging, which is definitely exciting, having been in the industry for so long. But it's definitely a task to really think about what that customer or consumer voice sounds like and what they're trying to say. But really, that's what we do. We take the information, we tell stories, and we really balance that art and that science. The science being the numbers that you give us, but the art really being how we visually express that and increasingly how we interpret that.
You mentioned that there's a big importance on doing things this year. Is there anything that you're doing particularly different in the pandemic that you were doing in the pre-pandemic years?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. First of all, let's start off with, talking about how we do things. The industry overall, and you can empathize with this, has increasingly become about pace. Fast, 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 fast. And more solutions exist that are quick turn, that are turnkey. And that's been the direction we've evolved into over the past few years. For me, I would say what the pandemic has done is encourage me to slow down a little bit. The reason for that is I want the time to look, analyze, and really understand what's happening with the data. I want the time to create a questionnaire that is going to encourage consumers and customers to want to participate in the research platform. And what I mean by that is there's lots of sensitive topics out there that we're exploring right now. And I want to make sure that when we get that one consumer, they want to participate and they want to be transparent with their thinking and their beliefs. So for me, it's been around slowing it down a little bit, which again has been a little bit conflicting to the trend that we were in prior to the pandemic. The second thing has been around creating an opportunity for the consumers to speak freely about how they're feeling prior to getting into the research questions and the category questions themselves. So some of the things we've done recently is just ask people how they're feeling. How are they feeling about the COVID situation, and allowing them to get it off their chest, particularly as you take paper products as a category, which is an industry that I do a lot of working. It was really important to understand how consumers felt about manufacturers, how they felt about retailers. And one of the things that we saw is they were passing the negativity onto other consumers and their behavior as opposed to the behavior of manufacturers. And I think that was a really big insight. So taking a step back and really thinking about people. We're speaking to people, not just consumers. We're speaking to people that have different response levels right now to the pandemic. And so tapping into that first, getting them comfortable, and then exploring the research program has been a big learning point, and it's allowed us to do things differently. And so I think it's something we will continue to monitor over time. We're not out of the woods yet. So I would say for the next couple of years, I do believe this will be our protocol. So listen, monitor, and pivot accordingly based on what we hear.
Do you find that with this empathetic framing of the questions that you get richer feedback?
I think I get feedback that gives me confidence that the information I'm analyzing is accurate. What I mean by that is I think you could infer that looking at research during these times could be somewhat tainted. By asking these questions, I have greater confidence in the information. So I don't necessarily know if they're acting differently, but I do get a good feeling that what I'm predicting in terms of consumers' opinions is valid and meaningful information.
Are there any, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I'm curious. Are there ways in which you're framing the question in particular, that some tactics that you're using in order to sort of develop that empathy?
I think it takes a team. So I will say, in learning from recent interactions, I think everybody sees it differently. So in recent engagements, I saw it differently to the VP of marketing, to the strategist at the ad agency. And so we all had to come together and brainstorm where our comfort levels were. I was a little bit hesitant in some regards as to instilling this sense of fear. in the wording. So I wanted to make sure that we weren't using words that assumed fear. I would say where, you know, VPs of marketing I've spoken to wanted to make sure that they could somehow tease that out, right? So I think it's getting together with the team, it's having the conversation, and it's exploring different ways, because the, you know, divergent thinking for me is at the epicenter of what research is. And so the more minds you can get together, the more brains you can get together, the better the outcome. So again, that's the exciting part, is thinking differently, seeing things differently, and tapping into to great minds.
I love the nuance of language and implying that into the research as well. Sabrina, thanks for joining me today, and we look forward to supporting more of your research in 2021.
Thank you, Pat.